going to get started here. Thanks to everybody for attending our program once again. So, as always, we'll announce that next weekend, you probably know, is a 3-day weekend. So it's Valentine's Day weekend, also is President's Day weekend. So we will not do a program next weekend, but we will do one the following Sunday, and we'll advertise it in a timely fashion. But I should mention the Jenny Wade program we did 2 weeks ago was recorded. Oh, you like that? Huh? It was recorded by Addressing Gettysburg, a podcast that you can, if you go to addressinggettysburg.com, at some point that will be up and you can listen to that if you like. And tonight's program will be recorded also. And also I wanted to mention in the audience is one of the hosts of the Battle of Gettysburg podcast, which is a very popular podcast also. So, if you can't get enough of the Battle of Gettysburg, you could download these podcasts of all kinds of different interesting speakers on different Gettysburg-related topics. Especially if you have a long drive in the morning, you'd listen to them on the way to work or the way home after work. So it's very popular for people who are commuters, especially, I think. But tonight I want to talk a little bit about 25 Hours of Gettysburg, or Abraham Lincoln's visit to our town in November of 1863. And this is a topic that I was very much interested in, when I was young. And of course, when you come to Gettysburg, and there's the Battle of Gettysburg, and of course, there's Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And, Lincoln spent just 25 hours in Gettysburg, but during that span, he put the finishing touches on and delivered what many consider to be the greatest speech ever written. While many books and articles have focused on the address itself and the circumstances surrounding its creation and delivery, I tend to focus on the time that the president spent in our town as a visitor, and also how he interacted with the local population. And it's estimated that 15,000 people attended Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And many traveled great distances to get here. But the majority of the people that were standing in the crowd were Adams County residents. So let's say if there's 15,000 people there, 2/3 must have been local Gettysburg or Adams Countyans. And as years passed, and the people, not just locally, but universally, began to understand the importance of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, it became somewhat of a distinction to have actually been at the ceremony that day. Gettysburg newspapers are filled with reminiscence of those who attended the ceremony. Starting in the early 1900s, as the last of the eyewitnesses passed away, there are literally hundreds of obituaries that I've discovered that mention being present at Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And I just put a few examples up here. Heard Lincoln here, dies at 97 on Thursday. Resident, that's Mrs. Ida Dobrel. Or she was actually a Sheeds at the time. And then John Black from Table Rock, man who heard Lincoln, passes away. Mrs. Penn, who was a daughter of one of the Biggs family that lived on the Tawnytown Road after the war, Basil Biggs. Her obituary talks about how she shook hands with Lincoln. And again, sometimes it's in the title of their obituary. And I find it kind of interesting that when you have an obituary of someone in a newspaper, it tells you their name, who they married, the name of their children, and they heard Abraham Lincoln. It becomes a tagline in your obituary. It's so important, or thought of to be so important. And again, here's two other articles Reuben Kalb that lived on York Street, and Harry Hartzell, and both of them talk about hearing Lincoln or shaking hands with Lincoln. It's interesting. I don't know if Wayne probably knows all about this, but Reuben Kalb also in his obituary mentions that he and his father, who were carpenters and undertakers, actually prepared Reynolds' coffin for him, General Reynolds' coffin. So, and Mrs. Hoke, I forget her maiden name, Miss Slagle, I think. Here's an obituary that just mentions this. And I just randomly picked some out. Oh, and I put this one in here. Maybe it's a great aunt of somebody that's here. Great aunt, maybe. Amanda Homan. So she lived on Baltimore Street for many years, just across the street down the road here. At the time of the battle, she was in Eppley and lived a little bit outside of town, down the Baltimore Pike, I believe. But Amanda Eppley Homan, in her 100th birthday, they interview her, and of course, her greatest memory was Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address. So it's something that it's near and dear to the hearts of the people who lived here, the fact that they saw Lincoln that day while he was here. And, early on I noticed that a lot of books written about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address focused on the eyewitness accounts of the dignitaries that were here, or nationally known people and their accounts, and a lot of them didn't pay attention to all these accounts by the local Adams County residents. And so that's kind of what I focused my attention on. And in 2004, I did an issue of Blue and Gray magazine, in which I focused on the 25 hours at Gettysburg, or they changed it to Lincoln at Gettysburg. I thought 25 hours was catchy. Instead of 24 hours. I couldn't help but notice, I did this article for Blue and Gray. I wanted to get all this research down into something that people could read, that was published. But, you publish something in the magazine article, you put a lot of work into it, you do get paid. And it's not like a book where you have to wait for royalties that might never come. You get paid instantly. So it's good in that respect. But the magazine comes out, it has a shelf life of a couple months, and then you never hear about it again, except that other people rewrite your article in their books. I couldn't help but notice that shortly after this, then Gettysburg College did a walking tour of Gettysburg, focusing on Abraham Lincoln's route from the train station to the cemetery. Then a couple years later, the foundation did the same thing. And the inspiration that they received from my article, I was surprised by the amount of information that seemed to be the same. I think when you're a tour guide and you do a lot of research and a lot of writing and lectures, you have to expect that. And you have to be, happy with the fact that if somebody uses your research, then you feel you made an impact on the way people think about things. I think that's the best way to look at it. I put together a walking tour for the elder hostel of Abraham Lincoln's route from the train station to the Wills House, in the procession up to the cemetery, and it was very popular, and I kind of based a lot of my research on that, his time in Gettysburg. And it does make a good walk from the train station to the site where he gave the Gettysburg Address and back. But I have notes from my various articles and stuff I've written. Also, now Civil War Trust, or American Battlefield Trust, if you get onto their website, they do have a Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address page, and we do have sort of a walking tour of Gettysburg on there that you can download and you can take also. So, the story of the Gettysburg Address is pretty simple. After the Battle of Gettysburg was over, there were lots of dead all around the battlefield. And there needed to be something done. What were they going to do with all the dead from the battle? Were they going to attempt to ship all these soldiers to their homes?
For lecture?
What's that?
For lecture.
just go up there and see if I don't know where Libby is. Libby. What are they going to do with all the dead? Andrew Curtin, the governor of Pennsylvania, arrived in Gettysburg shortly after the battle, and he realized it was a serious issue. The state of Pennsylvania had already passed an act that soldiers who were killed in battle, the state of Pennsylvania would pay for their bodies to be sent home to the family and, as a courtesy for the families of the dead. Governor Curtin decided, well, you know what, since so many Pennsylvanians are killed in this battle, why don't we put the Pennsylvanians in a common plot? We'll just buy a piece of land near Gettysburg and we'll bury them all there in the plot. Of course, he talked to the governors of other states. They thought it was a great idea. And so they came up with the concept of the Soldiers' National Cemetery. David Wills was a local attorney in Gettysburg. And David Wills had actually helped Governor Curtin in his bid for election in 1860. And he worked on his campaign. He was in constant contact with Governor Curtin through the early part of the war. And Governor Curtin turned to David Wills as an agent for the Soldiers' National Cemetery. And of course, it would be David Wills that would contact Abraham Lincoln and invite him personally. Now, they purchased land, they laid out the cemetery. At some point during the process, Governor Curtin had spoken to Abraham Lincoln. There had been a sort of an mass invitation to all the dignitaries, congressmen that might attend the ceremony. But Governor Curtin realized that Lincoln was thinking about attending. So he asked David Wills if he would write a personal note inviting Lincoln specifically. And that letter was sent to Lincoln by David Wills on November 2nd. I always think this is interesting. Keep in mind that the ceremony is November 19th. So November 2nd is, a couple weeks before it. So he sent two letters. He sent an invitation to him, and he also sent a personal note saying he could stay at his house if he so desired when he came to town. Now, this is a copy of the letter that David Wills sent. And I always like to point out that he says, it is the desire that after the orator, you as chief executive of the nation formally set apart these grounds to their sacred use by a few appropriate remarks. And I think a lot of people that have written about the Gettysburg Address point out that David Wills is gently telling the president that he is not to give a long speech. Edward Everett is the chosen orator of the day, and that Lincoln is only supposed to make a few remarks. But I like to point out that, inadvertently, David Wills created the structure which the Gettysburg Address would be. Just a short speech, and Lincoln had to then give that, those words in a short speech. Because if Lincoln would have spoke for a half an hour, we would not be memorizing his speech. Okay. So I think David Wills doesn't get enough credit for being the one to say a few appropriate remarks in a lot of these books. They mention that term, but they don't always credit David Wills with it. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln came to Gettysburg by train. And I should say this, most of the people who attended the Gettysburg Address that were not Adams Countyans or locals came by train. And you can see in my little map here that basically we're talking about.
Hello, Gettys nerds, it's Matt, and I hope you enjoyed that preview of our premium content that can now be found over at patreon.com. I just want to let you know that Addressing Gettysburg will always have free content for you to listen to in the forms of our narrative episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville and the upcoming episode entitled Invasion, June 1863, appendix episodes, and our wildly popular Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes. But episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville take months to produce, as things are now. I hear from people almost every day asking how long until the next episode is finished. And the answer is, when I have the time, I can do it. Your support at Patreon can cut down the time it takes to produce an episode by months. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe the Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes are what you like, but they leave you wanting to learn more. Well, fear not. More is what Patreon is all about. Patrons receive access to new premium episodes each week. These episodes are straight interviews or discussions with licensed battlefield guides, rangers, local historians, academics, authors, public historians, people from the Gettysburg community who do impressive things, and frankly, just about anyone who can talk on a subject related to Gettysburg. I want to make sure that the interest you already have in Gettysburg is enriched with our premium content. Your support means the world to me, because that means it will be easier to produce content that will bring Gettysburg to more people and, hopefully, more people to Gettysburg. And the podcast episodes are just the beginning. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg and become a patron. I thank you in advance.